Okay. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I know you are all joining from different parts of the world. It's going to be an exciting session today. That is promised. In our role as English language educators, I believe we have all at one point or the other questioned ourselves on the appropriateness of the variety of English that we teach our learners, as we know that there are different varieties of the English language. Now, how do we make that decision? Our presenter for today is going to share her thoughts and her findings on the different world Englishes and how they impact our work as teachers. She is well versed in the language and its intricacies. She holds a PhD in applied linguistics, and her areas of interest include world Englishes, corpus linguistics, and Austronesian linguistics. She mentors PhD and Master of Arts students, and she likewise publishes topics in those areas. She has so much experience, both nationally and internationally. It would be almost impossible for me to mention them all. She is currently an associate professor at the Department of English and Applied Linguistics of the De La Salle University in Philippines, and she is the chair of the same department. Shall we, with a round of virtual applause, welcome Dr. Shirley Dita. Dr. Dita, it's such a pleasure to have you presenting for us today.
Thank you so much, Doreen, and the rest of Ayalta Ghana chapter, for this invitation. This is my second time. Looks like the participants from your end enjoyed my presentation according to last time. And hence he requested me to speak and choose another topic, and I told him I can talk about world Englishes, since Ghanaian English is also one of the things that I usually look at. So now I'm here for the second time for Ayalta Ghana. So good morning to you all, and it's good afternoon on our end here in the Philippines. I think we also have some Filipino attendees. Some of them are my students.
Yes, a lot of them actually.
English teachers from all over the country. Okay, so let me share my screen. So we'll make use of the 2 hours because there are so many things that we'll be talking about this afternoon or this morning on your end. Okay, so for today, I'm going to talk about world Englishes and related paradigms, a lot of them. Then from there, I'll be talking about the implications of these paradigms for English language teaching. I believe we are all English teachers here, if not graduate students, or at least connected with the English language teaching. Okay, so my lecture will revolve around actually four issues, but I'll start with the background first, just a very brief introduction of how we came about world Englishes, and then I'll go to the discussion of world Englishes, but very briefly because there's other sub-themes that I'll be talking about as well. Then I'll be talking about English as a lingua franca, then go on to English as an international language, and then finally global Englishes. And I'll be talking about the implications of all these paradigms for the English language teaching. Then some concluding remarks after that one. So let's start. You probably have seen this one many times. This is the not so popular world map of English by Stevens in 1980. So this shows how English spread all over the world. So there are two major varieties of English. We have the American and British. For some parts of the world, they've been colonized by British, and so they have the British English as their influence. But here in the Philippines, we were colonized by the Americans, and hence our English was influenced by the Americans. So we have Philippine English in here. Okay. There are other framework of the spread of English or how English is viewed, okay, in many countries. This one is coming from MacArthur in 1987, another not so popular framework. For him, there's like standard world English in the middle, and there are standardizing and standard Englishes around that circle. As you can see here, we have American Standard English. They should be moving actually, okay, my slides, then Canadian Standard English or Caribbean and so forth and so on. And if you look at the upper left side of the drawing, you can see that they are categorized as standardizing English, like East Asian here, and Philippines is somewhere here, okay? And we also have here from the South Asian standardizing English, like Sri Lanka, Nepalese, and so forth and so on. I think Ghana is somewhere here, okay? Also categorized as standardizing, like African English, Nigerian, Ghanaian, and so forth and so on. But the question here is that, because in the middle of the circle, which you cannot see because of this box here, should there be a world standard English, okay? If so, whose English should this be? And why should there be a world standard English? That's actually the question. So I'll continue. So talking about standard English, I'm sure as English teachers, we had that notion that there's a standard English. We were talking all about standard English early on, probably in our formal schooling, okay? Because we have the belief that there is standard English depending on who colonize you in your country. So since here in the Philippines, we were colonized by the Americans, so our standard English would be American English. That's what we thought was the correct English. So when we talk about standard English, there are two schools of thought. One is the traditional school and the other one is the progressive school. Okay, so this is just a backgrounder of how the notion of world Englishes came about, okay? So for the traditional school, this is usually associated with Sir Randolph Quirk, okay, because he has a monolithic view of English. And for him, there's a need to preserve the hierarchical structure of English. He's British, very British. Yeah, he has, okay, I think the user of iPhone is doodling on my screen, okay? May I request? Okay, please do stop doodling on the screen because it's going to be, okay. There you go. Okay, so the other school of thought is called the progressive school as opposed to traditional school. In the progressive school, the man usually associated with this school of thought is Quirk-Kachru, okay, an Indian, and regarded as the father actually of world Englishes. For him, okay, he has a pluricentric view of English, which is totally the opposite of Randolph Quirk's perspective of English. For him, there's not just one English, but Randolph Quirk has a different perspective. For him, it's more of just one English, one standard English. So for Quirk-Kachru, he has a pluricentric view of English, and then he focuses on the respective cultural and political needs of speakers of English. So these are mainly the two schools of thought. So I'm showing you here a picture of Sir Randolph Quirk. Okay, he already passed on sometime in 2017, I think. Okay, he's a well-known British linguist born in the 1920s, and he founded actually the Survey of English Usage in 1959, which was the basis of the writing of the Comprehensive Grammar of English Language, published by Longman in 1985, still used as like the Bible of English teachers, okay? And he has actually authored a widely, a lot of reference grammars using descriptive approach. However, he still has that monolithic perspective of English. On the other end, we have Quirk-Kachru. You can see he's an Indian. He was born in Kashmir, India, but most of his academic life and professional life were actually spent in the USA and in the UK and in the USA. Okay. As a matter of fact, he became a professor emeritus of linguistics at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and became the president of American Association of Applied Linguistics, one of the high-end organizations of applied linguists. So he initiated, shaped, and defined the world Englishes, which describes the spread of English across the globe. And because of that one, he is regarded as the father of world Englishes. So the debate actually between Quirk and Kachru, okay, which was later on labeled as the Quirk-Kachru debate, which became very popular in the early 90s. Okay, this started when Randolph Quirk gave a keynote lecture at the Japan Association for Language Teacher Conference in Japan, JALT, in 1988. Okay, so I'm showing you here just some of the points raised by Sir Randolph Quirk. And he said that standard English should be prescribed in the British educational system, although he was referring to the British educational system, but he has the notion that there's a standard English and hence it should be prescribed, okay? And he also mentions about non-native Englishes being inadequately learned versions of correct native English. So these are the points that actually stirred so much controversy. And the non-native Englishes are not valid as teaching models, according to him. Okay, so he actually does not recognize or acknowledge that there are other varieties of English aside from British and American, and that ESL speakers must be discouraged from using the variety they hear spoken around them, because for him it is neither liberal nor liberating to permit learners to settle for lower standards than the best. These are his exact words. And later on, the keynote address of Randolph Quirk was published in one of the high-end journals of English language teaching, or just English language. That is the English Today, or the ET. It was published in 1990, called Language Varieties and Standard Language. Okay, and so with the publication of this one, it stirred so much controversy among the scholars of ALT and English language. And so Kachru also sent a response to Language Today. So a year after that one, Kachru had like an answer to the points raised by Sir Randolph Quirk, and his article was titled "Liberation Linguistics and the Quirk Concern." So that was the debate, okay? And in his article, okay, he criticizes Quirk's, for him, it's called deficit linguistics position, okay? And he emphasizes that English is no longer the sole possession of the countries of the inner circle, because that's what Quirk was actually emphasizing, okay? And he actually views Quirk's proposal as an outright attack on the recognition of pluricentricity and the multi-identities of English. So during the early 90s, that became very popular, and they called that one the Quirk-Kachru debate, or it's the monocentric versus the pluricentric perspective of English. Okay, I started telling you already a while ago that Kachru was the Indian guy who thought that, who realized that the English that he actually speaks when he was in the UK and in the USA is not the same as the English that is spoken by his colleagues, okay, in the university. The most obvious probably would be the phonological features of that one. As we all know, the Indian English has very thick accent, okay? But it appears that during his time, there was no mention of Indian English at all, as though there are only two varieties of English, the American English and the British English. And so he pushed for the recognition and for the acknowledgement of other Englishes, okay, most especially his own English, the Indian English, okay? So it was not until the mid-1980s when, you know, the noun phrase world Englishes, okay, started floating, okay? So one of the early outputs of Kachru was all about the three circles model, okay? And he has this old framework, actually, this is the old one, okay? And in the framework, he puts in the center circle, the inner circle English, okay? And he pertains to these countries as those that regard English as a native language, or the ENL countries. And since they are the native speakers of English, they are also regarded as the norm providers. So these are the norm providing circle, or the inner circle. And those and the circle that has a direct contact with the inner circle English are the countries that were colonized by British and Americans. That's why they are directly connected with the inner circle. And they are called the outer circle English. Okay, actually, some people are not very comfortable with the labels like outer circle, because again, there's a stigma to that. And since they belong to the outer circle English, they are also regarded as the countries that regard English as a second language, or these are the countries where English enjoys special status in their country, either as national language or as official language also, just like in the Philippines. And so these countries are also regarded as norm developers, meaning that they develop the norm that is set by the inner circle Englishes. And in the outer circle part would be the expanding circle, okay? And these are the countries that were never colonized by any of the two varieties, okay? And many of the countries, of course, in the world, in Asia too, or in South Africa, were not colonized by either the Americans or the British, okay? And so they don't have direct contact with the inner circle Englishes. So they belong to the expanding circle Englishes, okay? Or they are EFL speakers, or they consider English as a foreign language. And because of that one, they are regarded as norm dependent. They depend on the norm that is set by the inner circle English. This framework is actually criticized. May I ask the organizers if there's a way to erase the doodles, because the doodles will be reflected in all the slides, okay, until the end. So it's a bit okay, but anyway, I mean, only if there's a way to do that. Okay, I think there's a way to do that. Okay, let's see. I think you can do the undo. Let me try to erase. Okay, let me try to erase. There you go. There you go. Okay, so I'll continue. Okay. I was just mentioning that original framework, okay, was highly criticized because the grouping of the circles depend on the geographical location of the speakers. Okay, so if you are in the US, therefore you are regarded to be belonging to the inner circle. So if you come from the non-speaking countries, then you are labeled as coming from the expanding circle English. So the modified version of this one, of the concentric circles, is now the overlapping bubbles model. So this is how it looks like, okay? So from the inner circle Englishes, okay, and there's not just USA and UK there, but there's also Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and actually even Ireland, okay? And from there, we also have other and from the inner circle comes now, and there's an overlap, as you can see, of the outer circle, okay? And Ghana is there, and so is Philippines, and all the countries that were either colonized by British or Americans, okay? And the ones that belong to the expanding circle are those that were never colonized, like here in Asia, China, Korea, for example, Taiwan, Caribbean countries, for example, the most part of South America, and so forth and so on, okay? But even this model, this is also highly criticized, again, because the grouping is based on the geographical location of the speakers. So if, for example, even if you claim to have, say, near native proficiency in the language, but if you come from the countries, okay, outside the inner circle, then you are still regarded as belonging to either outer circle or expanding circle. But this is the highly, very much cited work of Quirk-Kachru, okay? What Quirk-Kachru would mean on the concentric circle model is that there are nativized varieties of English, okay, the ones that were colonized by Americans and British, and these are the countries that nativize their own variety of English by incorporating some innovations in their vocabulary, in grammar, in discourse, or in the way that they use the language. And that's what happens in all the former colonies of these two giants, okay? So they made English their own. Okay, there are some, of course, factors that influence the one, like their own culture, the first language, and a lot more. So they try to nativize their own variety. So with the nativization, there are new items of vocabulary and different patterns for speech events that were developed. Okay, and that actually happens when English is transplanted to another culture or to a new culture. And with this, okay, clearly English is no longer an exclusive possession of users in the inner circle. Okay. Another fact is that there are more non-native speakers of English than the native speakers. This is an old figure already, but sometime in 2002 and 2006, okay, there were already claims that those belonging to the inner circle were only about 500 million. Those belonging to the outer circle, about 650 million. And those in the expanding circle back then was already more than 1 billion, which means that 80% of all the communication in English comes from the non-native speakers of the language. In other words, the native speakers of the language are actually a minority as opposed to the non-native speakers of the language. So the phrase world English or world Englishes has officially entered actually the Oxford English Dictionary in 2010, then one in 2013. And if you look at the definition of world Englishes, okay, I mean, if you are using I think UK laptop, just like my Mac, okay, the word Englishes still gets the red wave under, which means that they still do not recognize plural form of English as a legitimate word. Okay, but world Englishes is already made to the Oxford English Dictionary, and the definition would be it's an international variety of English regarded as standard or acceptable wherever it is spoken in the world. Okay, so it's not just American or British English that is standard, but if it is used or spoken in a particular world, okay, then it is standard to them. Okay, so world English also refers to the English as is spoken around the world and regarded as comprising numerous differing regional varieties. So they are acknowledging the numerous differing regional varieties, usually excluding those Britain and United States. Okay, as a countdown, it refers to any of the national regional varieties of English, again excluding Britain and the US. So world Englishes with the ES, okay. Why should we pluralize English? I know that the traditional teachers of English would not want to hear English with an ES or pluralized English, okay? But the plural form is advocated by Kachru. I have already presented that was especially in his 1992 work, and he claims that the result of the spread of English in the whole world, okay, results actually in multicultural identities of English, because formally and functionally, English actually has multicultural identities with its spread in the whole world. Okay, the term English does not capture the social linguistic reality because it's multi cultural. Okay, so there are many identities of that, but the plural form of it, the term Englishes, captures the multicultural identities of it, and hence world Englishes. Okay, so the proponents of world Englishes promote the notion of pluricentric model and the legitimacy of multi-canons, and that is to redress the inequality that necessarily results from privileging any one model as superior or the best. Actually, it's the users of English language that regarded a particular variety as supposed to be the superior or the best. Okay, they put this variety like American English or British English in a pedestal, and they're the ones that regarded it as the superior one or the correct one or the standard one or the best variety. Okay, not English itself, not even the native speakers themselves, not Americans or British, but the speakers themselves. Okay, just like in the Philippines, that's what happens actually. Okay, like what they refer to as the standard English would be American English, or what they thought as the only correct English is the American English, okay? And any other English aside from that one would not anymore be called legitimate English, okay? With world Englishes, they recognize varieties of English around the world, okay? They are not subordinate forms to native speaker varieties, but they are actually of equal importance and as legitimate, okay, as any variety of English. So the acronym WE, actually, that's the acronym of World Englishes, okay, actually represents a club of equals. And this was emphasized by MacArthur in 1987. He says, we, okay, which is like the acronym, especially for our journal, okay, that actually represents a club of equals, okay? And World Englishes, or we, attempts to decolonize and democratize applied linguistics, and because of the recognition of the different varieties of English, okay? That was like the first step of decolonizing, okay, and democratizing applied linguistics, okay, trying to erase this colonial mentality or the notion that there's only one correct or standard English. Okay, there are, of course, I mean, since English has already been implanted in different cultures, okay, and there are many factors that have already influenced the nativization process of that one, okay, some because of, you know, the culture, the language, and many others. So there are now 5 levels of variation, probably even more than 5 levels of variation. The most obvious would be the phonological variation, okay? Even between, of course, between America and British, the phonological variation is too obvious. I don't even have to mention that one. There are also differences in the lexis, in the words, in the lexicon between these varieties, okay? If you have seen the work of Al-Jay, for example, in 1985, comparing the differences between American and British English, okay, that alone already tells us the lexical variation of these 2 giant varieties, okay? There are also differences in morphology, syntax, and pragmatics. So I wish I could, you know, show examples to convince you that there are really variations, okay, of different levels in world Englishes, okay? I'll probably be just mentioning some. This is an old publication by Samuel Aholo, 1994. So as early as 1994, okay, in Ghana, they were already recognizing that Ghanaian English sounds entirely different from American English or British English, okay? And Ghanaian English, the phonological aspect of Ghanaian English is actually well documented in Ghana, okay? And there were, of course, scholars that work, okay, investigate the many features of Ghanaian English, and they're also pushing for the recognition of Ghanaian English and the teaching of Ghanaian English, even in basic education, okay? This is an old one, 1994, okay, as early as 1994. So I'd also like to quote, of course, you know him. He's David Crystal, the giant when it comes to English language, okay? He's regarded actually as a legend, and he emphasizes, okay, that a totally uniform, regionally neutral, and unarguably prestigious variety does not yet exist worldwide. There's no such a thing, okay? Although other people believe that there is, you know, this American English or British English, as though that's the dominant sound, or, you know, the correct sound, okay? But David Crystal himself recognizes that it does not exist anywhere in the world, okay? Like regionally neutral or the prestigious variety, okay? What David Crystal actually is pushing forward is the 2 important concerns when it comes to the phonology of English, or when it comes to the sound of English, or the way we speak English, okay? While some would emphasize fluency and accuracy, okay, David Crystal pushes for the opposite of that one. For him, the 2 most important concerns would be intelligibility and identity. Intelligibility meaning, you know, understanding it, okay? When you can understand the message, okay, or the English that is spoken, that is far more important than being fluent or being accurate, for that matter. So the other one is identity, okay, because when we speak, we're not just as getting the message across, okay, but we are also communicating our identity. We're also communicating our culture, okay, through our language. And so when we speak English, that should be our concern. How intelligible is that? I mean, is it understandable? Okay, do other people understand your English? Okay, instead of trying to, for example, imitate the American twang, okay, or the, you know, the vowel reduction, okay. So keep in mind that intelligibility and identity are far more important than the other things that you probably have in mind. So there's no such a thing for David Crystal as homogeneity in language. We cannot have just the one sound of English. There will always be variation, okay? And as long as variation doesn't get in the way of intelligibility, as long as it's clear, it's clearly understood, the message is clearly understood, it has to be respected first, then fostered. You have to respect it, and then you actually have to foster it, because this one, the variations, are the makers of identity. Okay, so for example, you know, this is how I speak, because I speak Philippine English. I come from the Philippines, okay, and you probably have heard our colleagues from Ghana, okay, and when they speak to, they don't sound like my English, okay, and neither do they sound like British English or American English speakers. I totally do not sound like American speaker of English or British or Australian or Singaporean or any other variety of English, because I speak the Philippine variety of English in the same manner as you speak the Ghanaian variety of English. Okay, so the difference between intelligibility and identity is not just a matter of intelligence. Okay, so intelligibility is when you exert effort, okay, for your language, for your English to be understood. So that's for the head. But when you communicate your identity, it's for the heart. Okay, you want to make known that you are, for example, a Filipino speaker of English, that you are, for example, a speaker of English from Ghana, or you are, for example, an African speaker of English, and so forth and so on. So intelligibility and identity for me more than accuracy and fluency. So this one I'd like to quote what Smith was talking about English as an international language. Obviously, English has now become an international language. So when English becomes international in character, it cannot be bound to any culture. Okay, you cannot associate it with, you know, British, because it's English. It's their language. Or you do not associate it with Americans because it's the language. No, it's not bound to any culture. For example, a Thai does not need to sound like an American in an ASEAN meeting, for example, or a German does not have to sound like a British speaker of English when he's ordering coffee in a Starbucks anywhere in the world. He has to sound a German speaker of English, or, you know, a Thai is expected to sound like a Thai speaker of English, not anyone else. So English is used to express the speaker's intention to communicate, whether, you know, it's about business, policy, government position, about weather, political conviction, about anything under the sun, and so on. It is the means of expression of the speaker's culture, and not an imitation of the culture of the native English-speaking country. Keep that one in mind. Unless, of course, that is your intention, okay, that you are trying to imitate the native speakers of English, then that's something else. But when we speak, okay, we are trying to also communicate our own culture and identity. Hence, we don't have to imitate someone else's sound, someone else's twang, someone else's way of speaking, okay? This is also coming from Smith, okay, and he says that in EIL, or English as an international language, there's no room for linguistic chauvinism, okay, that the spread of English is not a homogenizing factor which causes differences to disappear, but it's the use of English actually offers a medium okay, to de-homogenize. So native speakers must realize that there are many valid varieties of English, and that non-native speakers need not sound like any group of native speakers in order to be effective English users. Okay, I hope that's clear to everyone. And as a matter of fact, native speakers need as much help as non-native speakers when using English to interact internationally. At times, the native speakers are more unintelligible than the non-native speakers. Okay. Well, obviously, for me, the most difficult to understand would be the Scottish speakers of English. Okay. Well, even the British English speakers themselves, okay, the ones from Scotland are usually not intelligible to speakers of, say, in Wales or or anywhere, Oxford, for example. Okay, I also have difficulty at first understanding, say, Australian English. They are, especially the first time, they are a bit, okay, unintelligible. So you see, so the native speakers themselves also need as much help as we do non-native speakers. Okay, that they also need to make themselves intelligible. So here I am quoting, okay, a good friend of mine, Professor Anne Pakir, in a TESOL convention in Atlanta, I think, okay, in 1998. Okay, this he emphasized. He is, Anne Pakir is a Singaporean, okay, and she heavily criticized the U.S. practice of accent reduction in the teaching of English pronunciation. We know that, in a word, for example, there should only be one vowel sound that is stressed. The rest are all reduced, okay, and that's the kind of like English that we're trying to imitate, okay. And Pakir, Anne actually criticizes this kind of accent reduction, okay. And she made this one, okay. She's known actually for this one, and I love this quote from her. Actually, she said, "Meddle with my accent and you meddle with my identity." Okay, so like if you correct my accent, it's like correcting my identity as well. Like you can't speak that way, or you cannot be Filipino, or you cannot be Ghanaian, something like that. Okay, so because again, your accent is part of your identity. Okay. If you want to listen to the different sounds of English, I'm showing you here IDEA. This is the International Dialects of English Archive. Okay, this is a website. You can Google it. As you can see here, this is the map. Okay, and you can click on any part of the map to listen to a sound, or to listen to the English spoken in that part of the world. Okay, so for example, you click here Philippines, then you hear Filipinos speak English, or you click somewhere in Germany, then you listen to a German speaking in English. That kind of website. Okay, so this is a good like a starting point. Okay, if you would like to convince your kids, your students, that there are different sounds of English, right? To show the phonological features of English. Okay, I wish I could talk about the lexical and grammatical features of English as well, but in the interest of time, I can just show you that there are a lot of corpora that actually talk about the lexical and grammatical features of English. I'm showing you here the english-corpora.org. This is the collection of existing huge corpora in the whole world. Okay, for example, here in the News on the Web or in the iWeb, as you can see here, it comes from 20 countries, the outer Englishes. Okay, and here there are many research outputs on these different Englishes, showing the lexical and grammatical differences or features of these different varieties of English. Okay, so I'm showing you here that world Englishes, I mean, is a legitimate field. Okay, there are established organizations. This is the International Association for World Ages, or IAWE. I am a lifetime member since I can't recall, I think early or late 1990s, okay, when we hosted a Yawe conference here in the Philippines in 2008 or 2009. Okay, so World English also has this journal published by Wiley. As you can see, this is the we, like the Club of Equals, World Englishes. There are a lot of resources written about World Englishes. We have Handbook of World Englishes and various research paper. Okay, a lot of them. Okay, now we go to World Englishes and ELF, because this is now like very popular in English as a lingua franca. Okay, and usual, okay, the usual reaction would be when ELF became popular. Okay, so I mean, there was World Englishes first, okay, and then the other paradigms like the EIL and ELF, they are the same scholars who came from World Englishes, okay, like our own colleagues. So there were reports like, are ELF and World Englishes actually competing paradigms, or are they complementing? Okay, because like a group of scholars established their own group. They call it the English as a lingua franca as opposed to World Englishes. So the answer to that one is that ELF and so English as a lingua franca and World Englishes refer to they are two different but complementary linguistic and cultural phenomena. I'll be explaining to you what ELF is. Okay, so just to show you that after the World Englishes, there were other paradigms that that have arisen. Okay, we call that one like a breakaway group from World Englishes, but it all started in World Englishes. Prior to the World Englishes, there was just the perspective that there's only one English, okay, until World Englishes became very popular in the mid 1980s. Okay, and then from there there were like breakaway groups, and one of them is the ELF. So I'm going to explain to you what ELF is. Okay, a while ago you heard like the English as a foreign language, so this is different from the English as a lingua franca. So just few of the many definitions of English as a lingua franca. The two ladies that have made ELF very popular would be Jenkins and Barbara Seidelhofer, and there are other actually like Anna Moranen, okay, and many of them. So I'll just be quoting here Jennifer Jenkins and Barbara Seidelhofer. In 2009, Jennifer Jenkins defined ELF here as it's the English as it is used as a contact language among speakers from different first language. Okay, so try to picture this one. If you are in, say, in a neutral place, for example, in at the airport, okay, or in an international conference, okay, anywhere in the world, okay, and you see someone, and based on the looks, you know that they do not speak English, okay, like I mean, based on the physical appearance, you would know, you are convinced that English is not their first language. Okay, yeah, at times we just say, oh, he's not American, or he's not British. So you wouldn't know what the first language of that person is. And when you attempt to speak to this person, for example, again at the airport, okay, or in a conference, and you'd like to, to speak to that person, okay, the default language that you use would be English, right? That's like our default language. Okay, you know that the first language of that person is not English, okay, and English is not also your first language. So, but you want to communicate with that person. Either you're going to ask for the direction or just the weather or time. So you'd like to communicate with that person. And the default language that you will be using would be English. Okay. And when you speak English to this person with obviously with the person who does not have English also as a first language. Okay, otherwise, if he looks like British or American, okay, then there's no need for you to guess, okay, or to try to make yourself understandable, because you know that they speak English. But when you are not so sure if they understand English, okay, then you communicate with them. So you use a particular English that does not have to be your variety. Okay, for example, when I speak to someone else, okay, I don't have to like carry my Philippine English, but I'll try to speak to that person, okay, kind of English that I would wish that he would understand. Okay, it could be like an English that you just invent or you just make up just so you'd be understood by the person you're trying to speak to. Okay, it doesn't have to be your own variety. Okay, so sometimes, for example, if you are in, I'm referring to our experiences here in Asia, when, for example, we go to Vietnam or to Myanmar, like that. So we say, picture, you take picture of me, or look for restaurant I want to eat, okay, without having to be very particular with the correct syntax or with the correct pronunciation or so forth and so on. You just want to, communicate with that person, okay? So that's what Jenkins was trying to say, that this is the English that is used as a contact language, okay, among speakers from different first language, okay? And Barbara also added to that definition, okay, saying that any use of English among speakers of different first languages for whom English is the communicative medium of choice and often the only option, okay? You don't speak, for example, I mean, obviously the person you want to talk to, say, is Asian, either Chinese or a Korean or a Japanese or a Taiwanese, but you don't speak any of those languages, okay? So you now turn to the default language, English, okay? So that's the concept of ELF, or English as a lingua franca, okay? Prior to the English as a lingua franca paradigm, we thought, we have the English as a foreign language, or EFL. And this is how those countries belonging to the to the expanding circle, or those that were not colonized by either Americans or British, regard English, okay? So the EFL, or those that regard English as a foreign language, okay? This is the notion. So EFL is part of a modern foreign language. It's usually taught in the university as one of the choices for foreign language, okay? But in the ELF paradigm, okay, this is part of world Englishes, okay? It's still part of world Englishes. It's not, okay, as I earlier explained, it's complementary of the world Englishes, okay? In the EFL, because we regard English as a foreign language, so that's more of a deficit perspective, okay? Because English for us is foreign. However, in the ELF paradigm, okay, there's the difference perspective. It's not that our English is a deficit, it's just that our English is different from your English, their English, or someone else's English. So that's the difference perspective, not deficit, okay? In the EFL, English is a foreign language, there's the metaphors of transfer, the interference, or the fossilization, okay? Like, that's how you acquire the language, and the way you pronounce some words has already fossilized, okay? But in the ELF, for the metaphors of contact, it, okay, evolves. So there's the evolution, okay, of the contact and the transfer, okay? For the EFL, code mixing and code switching are seen as interference errors, okay? Like when you're trying to speak in English and you couldn't sustain that, so what happens is you code mix or you code switch, okay? And these are seen as interference errors. But in the English as a lingua franca, the code mixing and the code switching are actually bilingual resources. So that's how Jenkins would explain the differences between English as a foreign language and English as a lingua franca. And these two should not be interchanged or confused, okay? There are a lot of works on English as a lingua franca. As you can see here, it started sometime in the early 2000s. Jennifer Jenkins was first interested in the phonology of ELF, because obviously it's not the same as, again, the many regional varieties in the world Englishes, okay? In the world Englishes, depending on whose variety that is, they have their own features of phonology that's usually, of course, associated with their own culture, with their own identity or first languages, okay? But in ELF, there's like a distinct phonology, okay? So there are like some sounds that that they can't produce. Okay, there's also the pragmatics, okay, by Christian Mayer Cord. These are all scholars from World English, all my colleagues. And the lexical grammar is investigated actually by Barbara Sadelhofer, and this is very interesting. Okay, there were also a lot of works in the building of corpora, okay, and they are called the English as a lingua franca corpora, in the same manner as there were a lot of corpora that were built for the world Englishes, for world Englishes. I think I have explained the one elsewhere. Okay, so one of the most popular ELF corpora would be that of voice. Okay, it's called the Vienna Oxford International Corpus of English. Okay, the project lead being Barbara Sadelhofer and Anna Moranen. Okay, so this is the voice. So this, I'll show you the screenshot later on. Another one is the Alpha, or the English as a lingua franca in academic settings. Okay, so they are also recognized in academic settings. We also have the ACE by Andy Kirkpatrick, or that's the yes, Asian Corpus of English. Okay, ACE, and yeah, there are also parts coming from the Philippines in there. Okay, ACE. These are all spoken. Okay, corpora. Showing you here just some of the lexical grammar features of ELF. I told you a while ago, that's investigated by Barbara Sadelhofer. Okay, one would be the uncountable nouns to countable. So since, you know, they have just been familiar with English, they were not taught the basics of English language, unlike the ESL. Okay, it was not a required course, for example, in the basic education in their own countries. So there are some would say changes, okay, or there are some differences in the way they make use of the language. One is that they make uncountable nouns countable. Okay, we know, for example, as ESL speakers, that there are certain nouns that are not countable, that remain to be uncountable, like information, you know, like sugar, for example. Okay, but for them, all nouns can be pluralized. You just have to add S, okay? And now they turn to be all countable nouns. There's also the zero marking of the third person singular, okay? For ELF, that's a bit confusing, that we say, I say, they say, but he says, she says, okay? So now if if the third person is singular, then you have to add S to the verb, that kind of thing. There's the merging of who and which, these two, even for the ESL speakers, there's also merging of this one. And there are new morphemes, the new use of morphemes. This is for the morphological aspect. For example, and actually it makes sense. So if the verb form of communication is communicate, they would, okay, make the verb form of examination examinate. Okay, like, you know, just applying the rules here. They both end in Sean, and the root word both ends in ate as well. Okay, so if the noun form of assess is assessment, okay, there were instances that in the ELF, the noun form of increase becomes increasement, not just increase. Okay, like, I mean, that's how weird English sometimes. They do not follow the rules, right? Okay, so how would you explain that one to someone who has just learned English? Okay, so this is just applying like generalizing the rules. So if the noun form of improve is improvement, okay, they would make the noun form of approve as approvement, not approval, for instance. Okay, or the noun form of expect is expectation, and so they would also put a noun form for the respect, which is respectation, and not just respect. Okay, this one, even non-ELF people, even ESL people, they usually are confused. Okay, the past form of watch is watch with an ed, and catch has the same form. Okay, so they would also just put an ed to catch, say catched, or for example, seek, SEEK, since others like pick would be pick. Okay, so they would also form the past tense of seek as seeked with an ed when it should be sought, or the past form of catch should be caught. Okay, so they are just applying the rules for other words with the same composition. Okay, these are just some of the lexical grammar features. Okay, Jennifer Jenkins also noted the phonology of ELF. Okay, and for her, there's the core features of English, but there are also non-core features. Okay, like core features would be all consonants; they have to be produced, but the non-core features would be the soft th, the sh, and the j. Okay, these are non-core, meaning it's okay not to be able to produce them. For example, our dear Chinese colleagues, okay, could not pronounce the soft th, okay, where I mean the ESL would say three, like 300. I need 300 pesos, where 3 is soft th. Our Chinese friends would say sui. See, they have difficulty producing the 3. They couldn't say 3. They would say sui, 100. Okay, you probably have heard them say that. Okay, vowel length distinctions, initial consonant clusters, the mid-central nerves, vowel nuclear stress, that these are core, but there are also non-core features. For example, the final consonant clusters. Okay, for the ESL speakers, they are able to produce those. Okay, but a lot of our ELF friends couldn't produce that. Okay, a good example would be our friends from Thailand, Thai. Okay, if you've been to Thailand, okay, and you go to the night market, okay, and you try to ask for, say, XL. Okay, so that's a consonant cluster at the end. The X, the K, and sound. Okay, you just try to ask that one to them, and they couldn't actually produce that. They say XL. They say XL. Okay, so not it's not a deficient or anything. It's just that their composition is different. Okay, so for them, the cluster, the consonant cluster is just challenging to produce. So in the lingua franca core, that's not like non-obligatory. It's non-core. Okay, and a lot more. The lexical stress, the reduced vowel or weak forms, they don't have that. Okay, or the intonational tones, or the stress-based rhythm. Okay, all of them would be like syllable based. So there are also features of ELF. Okay, that's the phonological aspect of that one. Okay, so here EF, this was supposed to be ELF, English as a lingua franca. Okay, let me change that one so that you're not confused. Sorry about that one. Okay, so there are many resources of ELF, English as a lingua franca. I'm showing you here just some of them. Okay, I don't even have to convince you that it's a legitimate variety, but it is. This is the interface of the voice. It's called the Vienna Oxford International Corpus of English. This is all pure spoken. Okay, ELF just held its 13th international conference in Taiwan in 2022. I haven't actually seen the announcement for the ELF 14 or for the 2023 international conference. Okay, they also have the high-end journal. It's called the Journal of English as a Lingua Franca. Okay, this is a Scopus Index. There are a lot of resources produced, okay, by Barbara Sadelhofer, Jennifer Jenkins. Here I'm showing you just a few of them. Okay, English as a lingua franca in the international universities. This one, English as a lingua franca, attitude and identity. If you are interested in conducting research on English as a lingua franca, okay, there are many resources on this field actually. Okay, now we go to EIL, or English as an international language. Okay, you might be thinking, is that again different? Okay, again, this comes from the World Englishes paradigm as well. Okay, so the EIL is used in general interchangeably with ELF, but with a focus on English language teaching. So like the EIL is more on the ELT aspect of that. It's like ELF or WE, but more on the ELT aspect of that. Like when you are teaching English, okay, you can't use the ELF because you are teaching it to speakers. So as much as possible, you have this English as an international language. So imagine when you are, for example, in an international conference, okay, even if you don't speak the language, even if you come from ELF countries, but when you are in an international conference, you try as much as possible to make yourself be understood. Okay, so you speak probably your best sounding English, or you want to make your English as international as possible. So that's like English as an international language. Okay, so EIL is more of the paradigms or perspective. Okay, this was made clear by Sharifian. And the functions or uses of English in international context, okay, was also produced by Matsuda and Friedrich in 2010. These are all, again, World English scholars. Okay, Tomlinson and Widowson define it as a variety of English. Okay, it's like ELF, World English. So there's also the EIL. Okay, but Sharifian in 2009 and most of his work, I mean, Sharifian, okay, before he passed on, was also actually pushing for the recognition of EIL. Okay, he's a good friend. He came to the Philippines in 2009 for the World Englishes, and was already promoting EIL. Okay, this was in 2009. Okay, and it's for him, it's more of a paradigm for thinking, research, and practice. Okay, so again, it's more for ELT. Okay, again, it's not different from World Englishes or ELF. So EIL as a paradigm acknowledges the diversification of English as a result of the global spread of the language, and also recognizes, okay, Kachruvian World Englishes, okay, and emphasizes the relevance of World Englishes in the teaching, learning, and thinking about English today. It's like that's the we call it like the bare minimum, like the baseline is to recognize that we belong to different varieties of English. Okay, but when we are talking about English for language teaching, then they are pushing for this English as an international language. So when you are teaching, for example, English, okay, say in an international context, say you went to any country, you went to Indonesia, okay, and you will teach English there, and you come from, for example, the Philippines, you are not to insist on your Philippine English, right? Okay, but as much as possible, you have like a neutral kind of English if you teach it. Okay, so that's what we call the international, that's the English as an international language. It doesn't have to be American or British, of course, but just like a neutral, okay, with the hope that it is understandable internationally. So the EIL also embraces and recognizes all varieties of English at national, regional, social, and intellectual levels in all circles as equal, just like World Englishes. It actually the notion comes from World Englishes. Okay, so no difference. So Marlina, okay, Robbie Marlina, okay, his work in 2014, he's the current editor-in-chief of RELC and also a good friend. Okay, so this is what he emphasizes. Okay, it's a linguistic and epistemological lens for researchers, scholars, and educators to put on in order to critically, okay, first, there should be a check in here, revisit and reconsider their ways of conceptualizing English, reassess their analytical tools and approaches they adopt in the social linguistic of English and TESOL disciplines, and revise their pedagogical strategies for English language education in the light of the tremendous changes that English has undergone as a result of its global expansion in recent decades. So not for any other thing, but they are emphasizing like English more for, okay, wait, give me a minute, okay. So here, again, emphasis is on the use of EIL, okay, for language teaching. Okay, apologies for the sound of the bark of my dogs. Okay, there you go. Okay, the concept of EIL or English is an international language is actually not new. Okay, a while ago I already mention to you Larry Smith. Larry Smith used to be the executive director of World Englishes until he passed on also sometime in 20, in 20, I think 2006 or 27. So Larry Smith, as early as 1976, has already been talking about English as an international language, okay? And just calls it IL actually, because this is part of world Englishes, okay? So for him, he says that IL is one which is used by people of different nations to communicate with one another. It's like, again, it's the default English language. This was also the concept of the ELF scholars, okay, those who later on developed it to be ELF, English as a lingua franca, okay? It actually came from Larry Smith IL concept in 1976, okay? So learners of an international language do not need to internalize the cultural norms of native speakers of that language, okay? As early as 1976, he was already pushing for this one. There was no mention yet of world Englishes, but they were already pushing for the, again, like, that's not sounding American or British when you speak English. That's the notion. So the educational goal of learning an international language is to enable learners to communicate their ideas and culture to others. Again, not to imitate the sound of their English. Okay. So as I was saying, EIL also has its own resources, just like ELF. I'm showing you here this one by Farzad Sharifian. Okay. Sorry. English as an International Language Perspective and Pedagogical Issues. This was in 2009. And this was the 2014 work of Robbie Marlina, the Pedagogy of English as an International Language, Perspective from Scholars, Teachers, and Students. They also have their own journal, okay? In other universities, there's also, like, this is like a program, English as an International Language, okay? And then after this one, so we have world Englishes, we have the English as a lingua franca, we have EIL, okay? These three, okay, believe in and emphasize the importance of recognizing all of them, the pluricentricity of English, and the equal treatment given to all varieties of English and speakers, okay? In that regard, they are one in recognizing the pluricentricity of English. Differences in English are neither viewed as fossil-ridden examples of interlanguages, nor inferior examples of incorrect speech or half-baked quackery. They are not, okay? So these three paradigms recognize that, you know, those fossil-ridden are actually not inferior examples of incorrect speech or half-baked quackery, okay? But they are recognized as sociolinguistically normal, they are necessary, and they are intrinsic to language varieties, okay? So if you have colleagues, if your students, okay, could not, for example, pronounce the soft TH or cannot make a distinction between the soft TH and the hard TH, okay, or has difficulty distinguishing the P and the F, or the B and the V, okay, that is perfectly all right. That's sociolinguistically normal, okay? As a matter of fact, it's even necessary, again, for the recognition of language variety, okay? There has to be some variation. We cannot, again, sound as one, okay? What I'm showing you here is taken actually from the Global Englishes paradigm of Nicola Galloway. So here, World Englishes has implications for ELT, as is ELF also has implications for ELT, the EIL and implications for ELT, and the fourth component, which is, this is also like another interest of mine, which I did not anymore include here because this one would require another 2 hours discussion, translanguaging, okay? But it's like the next to ELF would be, or EIL would be the translanguaging, okay? So for World Englishes, showcases new Englishes in different geographical contexts. This is what I've shown you a while ago. And then the ELF showcases the use of English among speakers of different first languages, like it's the default language of people who don't have the same first language, okay, or who have different first languages. And the EIL emphasizes multilingualism and the diversity of English for ELT. Okay, so this is more for English language teaching. Okay, and translanguaging, as you may know, emphasizes increasing linguistic hybridity and dynamic language contact and plulingual situations. It's like code switching or code mixing, okay, or using other resources in classroom, not just English. Okay, so for example, in an English class, okay, we don't have to speak English all the time, or we don't have to expect our students to answer in English all the time, but they are supposed to utilize all the linguistic resources available to them. If they have first language, they have another language, they know of other languages, they should all be encouraged to use all these linguistic resources. That's the very idea of translanguaging, okay, which is again very liberating, okay, as opposed to being strict when you are in an English class, that you are supposed to, you know, respond in English, you are supposed to speak in English only. Now we are encouraging translanguaging in all our classrooms, okay, not just in English classes, but in all classes for that matter. Okay, so next to that one, I'm showing, you know, the global Englishes. So like EIL, we have WE, ELF, and EIL, summing all up, and even translanguaging. These are all global Englishes, okay? This has to come dapat afterwards, but it appears there was a mix-up. Okay, so when you say global Englishes, I'm showing you here the resources for global Englishes. The most popular would be this one, Introducing Global Englishes by Nicola Galloway and Heath Rose. This was in 2015. Okay, but there were already other resources even prior to this one, also coming from Jennifer Jenkins. Remember Jennifer Jenkins, the woman in ELF, but he's also writing about global Englishes. Okay, and Nicola Galloway has this new publication. Now, not actually new, it came out in 2017, Global Englishes and Change in English Language Teaching. Okay, and the Global Englishes for Language Teaching by Heath Rose and Galloway. This is Galloway and Rose. This one is Rose and Galloway. Okay, so this is Heath Rose and Nicola Galloway. You will see her later on. Okay, if you look at the lecture of Heath Rose here at the University of Oxford, this is how it is phrased: Global English's implications for teaching English as a global lingua franca. Okay, so again, we only have global English just a while ago, then we have English as a lingua franca. There's already this global lingua franca, and so forth and so on. Okay, so these are the resources. Looks like okay. Oops, yeah. Did I miss this one? Okay. Yeah. Okay, I think I missed this one. Okay, it's showing you that here. So the global Englishes, I think this is what I missed. This is what I was looking for. So this now is the paradigm that includes concept of WE, the ELF, and EIL. Okay, like the combination of these three. Now we have global Englishes, so that they are not separate paradigms. Okay, and it examines the global consequences of English's use as a world language, and the global Englishes extends the lens of world Englishes, ELF, and EIL to incorporate many peripheral issues associated with the global use of English, such as globalization, linguistic imperialism, education, language policy, and planning. Okay, so it's like extending world Englishes, extending ELF and EIL, combining all these three, but even extending them. Okay, it's not different from world Englishes. Okay, and this one I showed. Okay, this one I showed already. So now, as we have seen, all of these ones, okay, all of these paradigms have implications for ELT. Okay, just to give you an example, for the ELT situation in the Philippines, that unlike many EFL countries in Asia, in the Philippines, we don't have so far issues on, say, whiteness or Americanness or nativeness power issue. You know that in some countries in the expanding circle, they would prefer a teacher, a native teacher or American or a white teacher over someone who has a degree in English language teaching. So we don't have that kind of issue in the Philippines, okay? Or the whiteness, nativeness in teacher hiring practices. We don't have that one. We don't have monolingual policy and maximum exposure policy, okay? We don't have that one in the Philippines, or we don't have the exclusive use of English in conducting classroom instruction, just like in Japan. Okay, or we don't have the early start fallacy. As a matter of fact, here in the Philippines, we have the mother tongue-based multilingual education. Okay, just to show you the situation of the English language teaching in our country. But these are my own observations when it comes to ELT in the Philippines. Okay. These are just my own observations. They probably are not true, but my own observations nonetheless. The teachers actually still have this colonial mentality. Everyone else actually has this colonial mentality still. And when I say colonial mentality, that's the excessive fascination, okay, to those with twang. Like, we are fascinated when we hear someone speak with American accent or British accent. I mean, everyone else who is not fascinated with British accent, especially, okay. But we still have that, I mean, it's okay if we have fascination. I mean, when I was young, I have fascination, of course, but not necessarily like obsession or making it a standard or making it your yardstick of language proficiency. The mindset of society, parents and administrators and teachers and students in that order, okay, is also problematic. They still think that those who speak good English are most likely to succeed in life. It's like, if you speak good English, most likely that's your ticket to success, something to that effect. Okay, that's, I mean, we still have that kind of mindset in the Philippines. I've also observed that, teachers are lacking awareness in the trends in ELT or in the English language itself. As a matter of fact, some have not heard of world Englishes, okay, until very recently. There are many advances in ELT, translanguaging being the buzzword everywhere, but some English teachers have not heard of translanguaging or would not recognize translanguaging as a resource, okay. There's also this resistance to change, resistance to paradigm shifts and to innovative ideas. Probably it's not just a situation here in the Philippines. Probably it could also be a situation in Ghana. I'm just assuming. Okay. So what is needed in our times? I mean, for the ELT in our times. So here I'm putting this, I mean, suggesting this one, that in teaching English, a necessity is a pedagogic model that is world English inspired, world English based, and world English adherent. Okay, since the baseline is like world Englishes before the ELF or the EIL. So, and this is coming from Jenkins herself. So, which means that that's like the baseline. Okay, our model should be world English inspired, based, and adherent, not anymore the traditional American English or British English. Okay. Holiday, 1994, Adrian Holiday here also said that teachers and their learners need to learn not a variety of English, but about Englishes. Okay. Should not be just about American English or British English. Okay. But about Englishes. And you have to early on, okay, tell your students, tell your pupils of the varieties of English. Okay, tell them that what they speak is Ghanaian English. Tell them that what they speak is Philippine English. That there is, of course, American English. That there is British English, and it's okay to be fascinated with all these other varieties. But there's also Singapore English. There's also Indian English. There's also this and that. Okay. So tell them all about Englishes. What is needed is an instructional backbone that is world Englishes moved, because world Englishes promotes inclusivity. It's a pedagogic model that highlights the homegrown varieties of English that is localized, indigenized, and contextualized, and not using American English or British English like the norm in your class. Okay, you have to recognize the homegrown varieties of English wherever you are. If you're in the Philippines, then it's the Philippine English. If you're in Ghana, then it's the Canadian English. Okay. These are just the floating a lot of paradigms. Okay, so we have English as a global language. You probably have seen David Crystal's book in 2003. Okay, we have World English by Brett Gifford in 2002. English as a world language. We have English as a foreign language, as a second language. We have EIL. We have ELF. And Jenkins has just introduced also the English as a multilingua franca. I've not even mentioned that one to you. So not just ELF now, not just English as a lingua franca. Okay, it's now English as a multilingua franca, EMF. Now we have the translanguaging, all of these ones. We have global Englishes. There will always be new paradigm that will arise in the future. Okay, so at least we are all aware that, there are and there will be more paradigms that will impact on our English language teaching, that will impact on our teaching in the classrooms. Okay, so we've got to reflect on all these paradigms. Okay, so how relevant are our lessons in the classroom to what's going on with today's communication? Okay, how much do we know as teachers of the English, the Englishes, and the Englishing, meaning the way they speak of our students? How much do we know of the linguistic community they belong to, or of the world they are going as English teachers? We have to ask ourselves that one. And as English teachers, where are we in this whole line of communication, of ELT debate, of English language teaching? Where are we? Are we just knowing this one for the first time? Have we been involved in any of the debate? So what are we doing? And what should be done with all these paradigms arising? Okay, so I have here that my challenge to English teachers. Okay, if you've heard me speak in the past, this is usually my closing speech, my challenge to English teachers. Okay, so as English teachers, okay, I challenge you to first raise not just your learners, your students, your pupils awareness, but the stakeholders awareness of the diversity of English. And when I say stakeholders, the parents, the administrators in your school who are not English teachers, okay, the society as a whole. Okay, try to raise also the awareness of the diversity of English. Tell them that there is world Englishes. Tell them that there's American, British English, but there's also South African English, Kenyan English, South African English, okay, Indian English, and so forth and so on. Okay, that English is primarily diverse. It's multicultural. Okay, respect the multilingual and multicultural nature of English. At some point, you will encounter speakers of English who may not be able to produce the TH sound, who may not be able to distinguish between F and P, of B and V, who may not be able to pronounce certain English words correctly in your perspective. And you've got to respect that one, okay, because of the multilingual and multicultural nature of English. And we are expected to promote intelligibility and identity more than accuracy or even fluency in the use of English language. Okay, as long as you understand the message, that's the very, very agenda of communication anyway. And the identity, when they speak and they sound like Indians, because they are communicating also their Indians. When they speak and they sound like Koreans, because they are communicating their identities. When you speak and you sound very Filipino, of course, because you are also communicating your identity. You speak and you sound very Ghanaian because that is your identity and that is your language and that is your culture. And we've got to promote that. So let's try to develop a world Englishes, an English as a lingua franca, an EIL, and a GE-oriented approach in the classroom. My verb is just try as much as possible, slowly. We can try that by getting away from those American and British norm. And altogether, let us help change the mindset of society on the English language, especially the belief that English, that the ability to speak English is like the gateway to success, that the only correct English is American English, that there is a standard English, that there's a correct English, that kind of mindset. We have to help people change that mindset, okay? And I just want to echo Churchill, 1999, when he said that, I hope this linguistic bigotry, okay, this linguistic fanaticism, if you call it prejudice, okay, will one day no longer be acceptable, just as racism and sexism have become unacceptable. We have long fought against sexism and racism, even at the height of pandemic. We fought against racism. Everyone was talking about that one. But in some parts of the world, okay, the linguistic bigotry is still very much in place. We as English teachers have to resist that one and have to promote, okay, diversity. We have to resist linguistic bigotry that should be as unacceptable as racism and sexism. Okay? Again, remember that English is just a language, not a parameter for measuring your intelligence. And that if your English is not perfect, it doesn't sound perfect, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't undermine your intellectual faculties at all. Okay, so what we need to do is to stop prescribing how the English language should be used or spoken. I know as English teachers, that's like we are wired to do that. No, you don't speak that way. It should be this and that. Stop prescribing. Okay, the English language will continuously evolve. It's going to evolve as it should, and there's nothing we can do about that. You don't agree to that one, then, but you cannot prescribe that. Okay, you can see the English language changing. I know that. Okay, but sometimes we resist, okay, the change, or we do not acknowledge the change. Okay, but we cannot prescribe. English language is dynamic. We all know that one. It will continue to evolve, and that's perfectly all right. Again, as English teachers, we are not the gatekeepers of the English language. We have no right to say what is correct and what is incorrect. We have no right to say what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. Probably in the academic writing, okay, but that's a different debate altogether. Okay, do not have the assumption that because you are English teacher, you are the gatekeeper of the English language. Like you decide when a structure is correct or not. You decide when something, okay, is acceptable or not. You may not like it, but everyone else is already using it. Okay? And what do we do most importantly? Empower the speakers of English, your students, your colleagues, the people around you, by recognizing their own variety. They speak Philippine English. Empower them by recognizing that it's okay to speak Philippine English. You speak Ghanaian English, empower the speakers of Ghanaian English by recognizing that they speak Ghanaian English or wherever you are in the world. Okay? So I hope we do not anymore promote this kind of Facebook posts like common errors in the use of English language. Please, please stop promoting this kind of posts on Facebook or anywhere else. Okay? So this is my closing. Your Ghanaian or your Philippine English is as valid and as legitimate as Singaporean English or Australian English or British English or any variety of English out there. And remember, no variety is more superior to or more inferior from other varieties. Can we all read this one aloud? Okay, everyone, join me. Okay, in reading this one, everyone. Okay, switch on your microphone. Your English
Is as valid, as legitimate as Singaporean English, Australian English, or British English. Varieties is no or
Other varieties.
More superior to or more inferior to that variety.
Okay, and lastly, tell this one to yourself as well. I am a non-native speaker of English, and I'm so proud of it.
Okay? And I am very proud of it.
Non-native speaker of English. Okay, finally, I want to invite you to Ekale. This is the 4th International Conference on Applied Linguistics and Language Education. You probably have seen my background. This is happening on October 19 to 21, 2023. Okay. The reason why I'm, because Nicola Galloway, the one whose work I've been mentioning on global Englishes, will be one of the speakers. Okay, Nicola Galloway, all the way from University of Glasgow, will be at the ECALE 2023 as one of the speakers, and she will be talking about global Englishes. I will post about her lecture later on. But we also have other scholars like Eric Figinal, who will be talking about corpus linguistics and what it does in our English language teaching, or Jong Bok Kim will be talking about construction grammar, and Andrew Moody from University of Macau will be talking about the influence of English in the pop culture, and our own Dr. Rochelle Lucas will be talking about reading literacy in the Philippines. Okay, so please do follow us on Facebook, okay, to know more about ECALE 2023. We're on Facebook, we are on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, okay, on YouTube, or you can email us at ecale.deal@gmail.com for inquiries. Okay, finally, so I am the conference chair for this conference. With me is Dr. Arnuka and Dr. Rentilio, so I hope to see you at ECALE 2023. Okay, for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dita. Wow, that was a very packed presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Dita. We have a few questions from our participants. And if you don't mind, I'll just read the question for you and then you can address it.
Please do, please do.
Okay.
So I just noticed that, we can only accept 100 participants, right? Because I've got messages that they cannot enter the room. Okay.
Yes, for the Zoom, we can take 100, but then the rest would have to join us via Facebook.
I see. Okay.
Yes, we do have some participants who are in the session on Facebook.
Yes.
Okay.
So from Miss Deborah, she says, I get that you're saying we should not force ourselves to imitate the native speaker's accent, but can we as English teachers teach the students the right pronunciation of English words so that irrespective of the accent they are using, they can be understood worldwide, or the pronunciation too doesn't matter?
Okay. I get that. Okay. There is what we call, we are actually guided by IPA. Remember, we have this International Phonetic Alphabet. So this is how it should be read. It should be pronounced. Okay. But the truth is, okay, for example, in the Philippines, we have this what we call the GAE or the SAE. Okay, Standard American English, or GAE, as our, probably that is also standard as our model for teaching pronunciation. Okay, but in reality, if you go to America, if there are 50 states in America, there are 50 different sounds of American English as well. So when you believe that there is standard pronunciation, whose pronunciation is that? If you say that this is the American English, whose American English is that? Okay, that was also my belief when I was still young. Okay, I have to teach them American English. But if you go to America, there are 50 states in America, and they sound totally different from each other. If you go, for example, if you are in Arizona, the Arizona speakers of English do not sound like the California speakers of English, or just like in British English. Okay, I mentioned one a while ago already. Okay, if you're in Scotland, you don't sound like people in Wales or in London. Okay, but we have the IPA. That is what guides us for the pronunciation. We can teach them the correct pronunciation. Okay, we can teach them, but to make, to insist on them, to force on them, and to regard them as deficit when they cannot produce, that's the problem. Okay, if I may share, when I was in elementary, when I was in grade 4, I vividly remember that. Okay, I was punished. I was asked to stand for the whole meeting, like 40 minutes of some sort, because I couldn't produce the sound of the different O in the phrase coupon bond. Coupon bond. I would say coupon bond. Okay, so there are 3 O's in the coupon bond. The COU is Q, so the O there's different. And then the pon is schwa, coupon. Then the bond, the O in the bond is O, coupon bond. Okay, so I would say as I was young then, coupon bond. Okay, so I was asked to stand for like 40 minutes because I couldn't produce perfectly the sound of coupon bond. Okay, when everyone else actually could not distinguish the 3 O sound in that phrase as well. So why punish me for not being able to produce the Cuban one when everyone else actually couldn't produce that one too? Okay, we can of course try to teach our students. Okay, and I, salute you for that. I'm doing that one. I'm trying to, teach my kids, teach my, my family members. Okay, but we cannot impose on that. And if they cannot produce that one, that should not make them any lesser speaker of English. Okay, at least recognize that they have variety, that they have regional varieties, that they are probably they are unable to sound like American English. Okay, so you see, if there are in American English, there are 12 vowel sounds. 12. In the Philippines, for example, we only have 5 vowel sounds. We only have a, e, o, u. So if you are familiar with only 5 vowel sounds, how do you expect someone to produce 12 vowel sounds? The a, different. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Yao Khan on Zoom. He says, English is a language variety. So would it be your considered view that any attempt to imitate a cultural variety makes it anti-crystal? I don't know.
It's not just anti-crystal. I mean, I emphasize that one, okay? No need to imitate someone's culture, someone's sound when you're speaking English, okay? So everybody, again, what did I've been emphasizing the whole time. It's intelligibility and identity. When you speak in English, just make sure that you are understood, you are intelligible, okay? And the other one is that when you speak in English, make sure that you don't lose your identity along the way, unless that is your idea. You want to lose your identity. You want to pose as someone else, then that's beyond the point, okay? But again, and this what David Crystal emphasized, intelligibility and identity are far more important than fluency and accuracy. But if you want to be fluent and accurate, still, I salute you for that. But that should not be imposed. That should not be made like obligatory or something.
Okay, we have a question from Facebook from Mr. Prosper Dogbe. He says, in our setting, Ghana and specifically at the senior high school level, students are assessed in oral English, and we are mandated to teach them the British English variety for the purpose of passing the exam. What should be our stake as teachers of such students? Just teaching them to pass, or accepting and respecting their inappropriate pronunciations?
Okay, that's not just that's not a problem of Ghana Ghana teachers only. Anywhere in the world, okay, we are experiencing the same problem, okay? Because again, we cannot change ELT, overnight, okay? Assessment is another thing, okay? Probably that's the last aspect that will change, okay? So we are teaching this one in our classrooms, but the way that we are assessed, especially government assessment or international assessments, still have not changed. We have the IELTS, we have the TOEFL, okay? They still have the standards, okay? And that's also highly political, okay? So for now, we have to conform to these ones, okay? The national language assessments in all countries in the whole world are still doing that one, okay? But we can only hope that eventually it will change, that eventually all these language assessments, national language assessments, or even international, will soon recognize language diversity, will soon recognize, okay, the variety of English, okay? But for now, we cannot, we cannot compete with that one, okay? But slowly, they are slowly recognizing that one actually. At least in the Philippines, they are slowly recognizing that the variety that we speak in the country is Philippine English and not American English. And hence, our students should not be tested based on American English standards because they do not speak in American English at all. Okay, again, all these things do not happen overnight. Okay, so we are slowly, that's why we have a lot of work to do, English teachers. Okay, we remember the challenge that I posted? We have to raise the awareness of not just our students, the stakeholders, or everyone that we know of the diversity of English. Okay, probably English teachers are the only ones that have heard of world Englishes, but the non-English teachers are not aware of that one. So let's raise the awareness of everyone of the diversity of English. Okay, and just hope that the national assessment and the government practices will soon, okay, change as well.
Thank you. Then back to Zoom from Dyson Asebuche. I hope I got the name right. What impact does the dominance of English as a lingua franca have on the preservation of linguistic diversity and cultural identity around the world?
Impact of the dominance of English as a lingua franca. It's like
On
there's
linguistic diversity, yeah.
No dominance of English as a lingua franca. Okay, so they are just, you know, recognizing they're fighting for English as a lingua franca. Okay, I don't get it when you say the dominance of English as a lingua franca. Okay, as though you're assuming that there's the dominance of English as a lingua franca. Okay.
Let's see. Okay, from Mr. Daniel Nana Ajeman. He is a little baffled. He wants to know whether if native speakers need help than the non-native speakers in the language, then where are we as non-native speakers heading to? Morning.
Okay. Where are we heading to? I mean, it's not going to change. We will still be non-native speakers of English. Okay. So what all of us should be doing is to again raise awareness, okay, of the diversity of English. Okay. If we can convince, I mean, I know that there are still some non-native speakers who feel inferior of their English. Okay. This I felt when I was in the US. Okay. Especially my own brothers, the Filipinos. Okay. When they are speaking with native speakers, they have this, you know, inferiority. They feel that their English is not as good as the native speakers' English. Okay. And at times they become conscious of their own English. They become inferior. And at times they could hardly speak because they feel that their English is inferior. Okay. You know, if you have that kind of thinking, it just means that you are not familiar of the linguistic situation, of the linguistic realities. Okay. And the reality is that the native speakers also have their own problems, in as much as the non-native speakers have their own problems in terms of their production of the language. Okay. There are many studies that claim that non-native speakers are actually more intelligible than the native speakers. You can check Rafiq Smith and Rafiq Saad when they had to test speakers from the US, from the Philippines, from India, I think from Korea. Okay, and they wanted to test the most intelligible variety. And what emerged is actually non-native English is more intelligible than American English or native speakers of English. So do not be so conscious if your English does not follow the stress time syllable, if your English follows the syllable time English. Don't be too conscious if you're not able to reduce, for example, the vowels in your words. That's perfectly okay.
Okay, thank you. Then from Jetro Achivida, he asks, he is from the Philippines. In light of our own curriculum change, do global Englishes affect English language curriculum development? If yes, is it a reflection of globalized trends in language? That's the question.
I posted I think a few months ago, okay, in my post I said this one already is in the news, that the curriculum in the Philippines now recognizes Philippine English in the curriculum. So like English language teaching in the open and close parentheses is already the Philippine English language teaching. So that's a good start. Okay, so we are a bit delayed, that it's only now that we are recognizing, for example, our local varieties, but it's a good start. So you see, now in the Philippines, we are just starting to recognize our own variety. Elsewhere in the world, they are already talking about global Englishes. Okay, but at least in our language, malayo pa, pero malayo na, so to speak. At least we have achieved something already. Okay, and that's like the first step the recognition of our local variety. Okay, there will be, of course, impact on the English language curriculum. And I look at it as a positive impact, that that the norm in ELT in the Philippines will not anymore be American English, but Philippine English. That we will not be expecting our students to sound like Americans or British, that it's okay for them to sound like Filipino speakers of English. That's like my ultimate dream, okay? That we will get to that one.
Okay, so Miss Esther wants to know the difference between world Englishes and global Englishes.
I think I have already presented that one, okay, many times. So, global English is just, the WEEILELF. It's not like a separate paradigm altogether, okay?
Let's see. We have a comment here from Miss Grace Boateng. She says she has friends in Vietnam who say you have to sound exactly like a British in order to teach English there. Yes,
yeah, that's the problem. I think I said that one, right? There are still a lot of universities in Asia who have this native speakerism, okay? In Japan, I know, in Vietnam, in Taiwan, they would hire an American, okay, who finished any course for that matter. They would hire over someone who has a PhD in ELT or has masters in PhD. That's the problem, okay? Yeah, that's very sad actually. And I hope, that will be eradicated soon. But there are still some countries that practice that one.
Okay. Then Miss Josephine wants to know the difference between ENL and ENNL. I don't know.
I think we have already
English when used.
Yes, we have already, I have explained that one already many times in my presentation. I'm looking actually at the questions now. As English teachers, let's be descriptive rather than perspective. Yes, correct. Thank you, Dr. Anesito Maturan. Okay. Then perspective to make learning enjoyable experience, but an English teacher has to cope with the standards and expectations to get the job in other countries. Yeah, that's a sad thing. Okay. That's a reality. Beautiful people, beautiful thoughts, beautiful ways of Okay, I'm looking at the comments. Dr. Dita, teachers of English from Ghana have been made to understand that teaching English to students in the UK, some native English speaking countries, is no-go area. Very sad. Can you start a movement to address that? I hope so. Okay. Yeah, there are already movements actually. There are. Okay, so that's why we need to raise the awareness of people, of teachers. Okay. I'm happy that, I'm happy with the interaction, okay, with the questions of the participants. It just means that they listen to the lecture. It just means that they are very much willing to, interact. Good. Salamat so much, okay, for your response, Dr. All our love. Okay, thank you.
You have addressed a lot of the questions in your presentation already.
That's right. That's right.
I wouldn't repeat them.
That's right. Okay.
Wow. We've done almost 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Dita. You have left us a lot to think about and to work on as we go about our daily activities as English language teachers. Yes. Thank you very much, participants. It's been a very interactive session and we appreciate that. I have posted the attendance and evaluation link in the chat. Kindly do well to fill it with your correct details for the processing of your certificates. And if you have any further questions, you can email them to the address that you received the invitation link from. Director, let me see if he's still here. Mr. Akins. Okay.
Hello, Ms. Doreen.
Yes. A minute, please.
Hello, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So that was a wonderful webinar. That was a very good presentation. And I must say that all our participants on Zoom and Facebook, they really enjoyed the session and they left so many messages and a whole lot on Facebook. Thank you so much, Dr. Shirley. It's been an awesome time with you. we believe that our participants have taken so much and it's going to help us in a teaching of English language, not only in Ghana, but also across the world where we find ourselves. Thank you so much. All right. So this is our certificate of recognition going to Dr. Shirley Dita for generously sharing her time, effort, and expertise as resource speaker of the webinar entitled World English and Related Paradigms, Implications for English Language Teaching, conducted by the International English Language Teachers Association, Ghana, and it's awarded this 9th day of September 2023. Thank you so much, Dr. Shirley. We are grateful.
Thank you. Let me go back.
All right, so we have any other
if I could say something, I wasn't here for Dr. Dita's presentation last year, but I have watched the video on YouTube and I was really looking forward to this presentation. I know this will not be the last time she'll present for us. She will definitely come again. And we really appreciate you always coming whenever we call. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doreen, and thank you, Ebenezer, for the invitation. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Okay.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll get in touch later for more education.
Okay. Thank you so much. Can I leave now, Ebenezer? Okay.
Yes, Dr. Dita. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.